Hi, my name is Janice Switlo, and I have been reviewing a book by Charles Mann titled 1493. And he speaks about something, and this is the title of this episode, that he calls mixed motives. And I'll just read from page 507 of his book. Complicating all is the welter of mixed motives. On the one hand, people want the wash of goods and services that the worldwide market provides. No one forced Thelma to build a resort for foreigners. He's talking about some instances of developments in various areas. And these are Indigenous nationals. In Amape, nobody twisted Donna Rosario's arm to buy a television and a freezer. Nobody was holding a gun to the head of the teenage Chinese villagers in Shanghai who clamor for Nintendo games and US brand cigarettes and DVDs of Will Smith movies. Or for that matter, their counterparts in Beijing and Shanghai, whose demand for French wine is driving Bordeaux prices to amazing heights. Smartphones, aerodynamic sneakers, beige faux leather living room sets. People desire these things. Absent catastrophe, they will get them, or their children will. On the other hand, so that represents, the modern day desires in the marketplace and capitalism of encouraging us to want these things and work hard in order to buy these things as being sort of the epitome of happiness and success. On the other hand, the same people who want to satisfy their desires also resist the consequences of satisfaction. They want to have what everyone else has, but still be aggressively themselves, a contradictory enterprise. Floating in the capitalistic stream, they reach down with their feet, looking for solid ground. To be a good place to stand, it must be their own, not somebody else's place. As human desires bring the homogeneous scene into existence, billions of people marching through increasingly identical landscapes, that special place becomes even harder to find. Things feel changed and scary. Some people hunker down into their local dialects or customary clothing, or an imagined version of their own history or religion. Others enfold themselves in their homes and gardens. A few pick up weapons. Even as the world unifies, its constituent parts fragment into halves and the halves into quarters. Unity or division, Thelma's Paradise or New People's Army, which will win out? Or is the conflict inevitable? And this reflects the experience of Indigenous nationals, especially those located outside of major cities. If you're looking at someone close to Kelowna, for instance, in British Columbia, they're pretty much accustomed to life as it goes on outside of their residence. But this becomes the issue and drives the animosity that happens and the infighting that occurs. And as that was expressing, splinters instead of building unity. So what drives that, right? Canada and the provinces will hold out carrots saying, if you sign these things, you will be progressive. And as such, you will benefit. You will change and improve the quality of life, which means you'll be able to buy more Nikes for your kids. And I'm not putting that down, right? These are very real as described. These are the counterbalances, the tugs, the pulls that happen where people want the best that's available, but yet they want to preserve who they are. And how do you do this? He's not offering any suggestions as to what to do. He's really just identifying the issue. And when I read that, I totally related to my experience with Indigenous nationals, people living on reserve, people feeling they have to leave where they are in order to go to the cities, and that usually ends up being the inner cities, in order to try to make that dream come true. You get educated, be able to have a career, earn a decent dollar, so you can buy that big screen TV and you can provide for your children and address all their needs that it seems to you everyone around you has. But Canada really, as has happened in the States, is really splitting into this, the haves and the have-nots. It's that 1% versus the 99%. And while non-Indigenous nationals are, just Canadians generally, are looking at and questioning whether that's all there is to life. Does that bring happiness? This constant striving in order to earn, in order to try to buy and meet the needs and desires. Most Canadians do not have a foundation. Well, I guess that's not true because we have so many immigrants now. For instance, in the Lower Mainland, I think the majority, are can be said to be immigrants, right? Depending on the time frame where you classify that. So that's changing how things are happening. I mean, just with the quarantine, I was just reading an article that, malls are not going to be the thing that they were. People used to go to the mall. It was fun to go and be seen, window shop, buy things, do that kind of stuff. That's not appealing to people so much anymore. So this may well represent an opportunity for Indigenous nationals to sit down and think, what is it we really need? Do we really need to keep up with the Joneses? Is that really how we've survived and why we're here today? Or is there some deeper meaning? Is there some deeper, if you look into the Indigenous law, will that, pursuing that, will that provide for future generations? Because remember, it's not just about now. It's about the long term. 7 generations hence is supposed to dictate and drive decision making. But yet, everyone is being conditioned to look at just today, and to leave behind those Indigenous laws and requirements in order to adapt to and abandon all that goes with that, to become, to merely only wear your Canadian hat. Because remember, Canada has deemed Indigenous nationals to also be Canadian citizens. It doesn't have to be that way, but as has been demonstrated, and I believe I've spoken to this in previous episodes, the more you are dependent upon Canada, for example, and it's been intentional to get you to be dependent, to have you in poverty. But what is that definition of poverty? I mean, right now we're seeing that people with money, people who have those, have had the income and can meet all the needs that they wanted to, are now actually looking for what Indigenous nationals have. They want some peace and quiet. They want to be able to have a property where they're not surrounded by high density and they're not in the cities. They're going to start coming and looking to have what you have. That's switching the definition of wealth. It's a good time to reflect on what is the value system. What is indeed what defines wealth? I mean, for myself, the one thing that I noticed immediately upon being invited on reserve was the large size of families. And indeed, I was just reading the old timers, going back 150 years or so, how, the Cree, the Nehia, had such a high fertility rate. There's so many large families, and still much greater than Canadian families as a rule, right? So I looked at that, and one of my fondest memories as a child was when all the family was there, Christmas dinner, classic, right? And it was the best day. My mom would be stressed because she's cooking and preparing, but all I could see were and I'm sorry I'm actually getting emotional about this because I've lost 2 of my brothers, right? They've passed on. All I could see was everybody, that energy, loving to be together, sharing a meal, enjoying themselves. It was the epitome of wealth and happiness for me. And when I went on reserve and I could see, yeah, sure, the houses are not what you see in Vancouver, for instance, typically, right? But what I saw And even, when I went into, Rachel Paul's home in Penticton, and all I saw were mattresses on the floor. But that's not what my focus was on. My focus was on these beautiful chickens running around. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I bet you that one would taste good, or her eggs would be great. And I saw people after people coming in to visit. As I was there maybe the full afternoon, 5-6 hours. I must have seen 15 people drop by. They didn't know I was there, right? But as they were dropping by and we all engaged, and these are elders and there were grandkids and great-grandkids, everybody just open door coming in. Nobody cared about the mattresses on the floor. There was always coffee or tea. There was always some place to sit or stand. The younger guys would stand, and I was always offered, the nicest chair, which meant it had a cushion on it. The measure of wealth, the measure of value. What's really needed right now? It's so encouraging for me to see people planting gardens and starting to learn about relearn about preserving food and those kinds of needs. Working together to hunt and provide, and in that doing, that coming together again. Indigenous nationals have always impressed me as not living lives as individuals, alone, lost in the sea of whatever, right? They've impressed upon me. I remember Ray Derrickson, he would go on about all his relatives and I could never keep up, and he was in West Bank. But I was so jealous, right? I saw that was incredible wealth, the size of his family, the ability to never be alone. And it strikes me that, so many children that have been taken, 60 scoop, or have been lost through residential school system. I can't imagine what it was like for them to go from being completely surrounded with so many people to turn to and be part of their daily lives, to being taught how to be alone, to deny that, to change their worldview, and say, as an individual, here's what you need to do to be successful. The sort of capitalistic influence, if you will. So it's important to think about your mixed emotions as an individual, as a family unit, as a community, and ultimately as a nation. What is important? Remind yourself what your systems, your value systems are. What is wealth? Because keep in mind, what you have been taught to no longer see as your measure of wealth, others are now starting to yearn for. They're not only wanting your land and your sovereignty and what you have, they're wanting your lifestyle. And remember, Indigenous nationals are supposed to teach how to live a good life. They're to teach and share what are good laws, what are good ways to share wealth, what are good ways to come together, what are good ways to deal with people who are lost and are upsetting a community. Remember that the justice system, and I'll be getting into a particular episode on this, used the justice system to try to break up families. And that continues. But like I said, I'm getting aside. My main point today is understand what the mixed motives are. Understand those things that tug and pull. And start looking at what's really important. What's really important to you, to your family, to your community, and to your nation. And I highly encourage this time as a great opportunity to not only, make those lists, but to actually start doing. And it's, as I said, it's so encouraging to see so many people actually out there, and they're doing, and they're sharing how they're doing, and people are loving the fact that they have access to information like that. For instance, social media. It's a good thing in the sense that people are being able to learn about gardening, whatever the issue is that will support life, right? That's what's coming together, and it's a very exciting time. Thank you. That's all I have to say.